Yes, people, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Pit Stop Lounge. This is episode number 23. And as you can see, guys, today is going to be just me. Malcolm is currently unavailable for today, so he won't be able to join me for this one, but hopefully he'll be back for next week's episode. But as they say, the show must go on, and we have Grand Prix to talk about today and also some other news off the track, which we don't have many to talk about today, to be honest. But before we get into today's episode, guys, make sure to smash us a like, follow, and share on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Especially if this is your first time listening to this podcast. It's a podcast about Formula One. For those who really don't know what happens off the racetrack, on the paddock, and outside of it, guys, we talk about every single thing that is related to Formula One, mostly about the race and track and news of the track. So make sure to follow us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And for our Spotify listeners, make sure to hit us up with a rating and let us know your thoughts on each poll we publish for every single episode. Hope you're having a good start of the week, guys. As for myself, last week was a bit tough. Had one of my family members, relatives in hospital, but thankfully now she's out. She's out and recovering very, very well. So that at least has ended on a positive note. Um, Literally just a few minutes before I started recording, guys, I just found out that Eric Ten Hag, who is obviously the Manchester United manager, has been sacked. He's been sacked after a poor run of results. Obviously, this is news that I was expecting, but I didn't expect it to arrive at this particular moment, to be honest, because I thought he was going to be sacked even after during the next international break or even before. But that's not the case. So yeah, that's obviously with United. That's a topic for another day. But it's a big, big mess that club at the moment. So I mean, we can only just live day by day when it comes to United at the moment. But anyhow, with that out of the way, let us begin today's episode. We obviously, guys, have the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez track that we have to talk about, otherwise known as the Mexican Grand Prix. This is the second race of the Americas section. Of the Americas section of the Formula One season, it's obviously back to back. We're currently on a triple header weekend. Last week in Texas, this weekend in Mexico, and obviously, this week we have Interlagos to talk about, which we're going to get to very, very later on. But with regards to the Mexican Grand Prix, apart from 2019, where Hamilton not only won the race, but he also won his sixth world title, this has been a track that's been dominated by Max Verstappen. He's literally won the last four races in this track. With regards to the track itself, um, uh, personally not one of my favorite tracks in the calendar, but it's a track that stands out for a number of reasons. Number one, the atmosphere. It's not just this race, but also the rest of the America portion section. The America portion, the atmosphere is one of the highlights, and Mexico is probably one of the standouts when it comes to the atmosphere. It's always rocking every single event, if it's practice, qualifying, or the race. And obviously, the fans are out in full force because their hero, their local hero, Sergio Perez, is also drives for Red Bull. This is also his home race, so Sergio Perez needs to step up to the occasion when it comes to his home Grand Prix. Which, spoiler alert for this race, it didn't turn out to be that way. But again, I'm gonna mention about that later on in this episode. But at the same time, this track also stands out because of its high altitude. It's a high altitude and low grip race. It's also one of the highest circuits in the Formula One calendar because it's obviously in Mexico, which is very, very far away compared to the world as well. Obviously, the change in attitude brings a lot of obstacles, not just with the oxygen of the drivers, but also with the performances of the car. Excuse me, engine power, cooling, the downforce, to name such a few. And it's also 71 laps. It's not a short race. I mean, this is pretty much on the equivalent of the Monaco Grand Prix, where it's 78 laps. So this is a bit towards that region as well. But and as I said, this track has been dominated by Max Verstappen. And the last few occasions, the last few races, haven't been eventful to say the least. And this weekend, once again, um, proved to be uneventful. Obviously, Max wasn't the winner during this weekend. It was Carlos Sainz, but obviously we're going to get into the race later on in this episode. Now, walking into this weekend, the talk of the town was obviously Max Verstappen and Lando Norris is the driver's title between those two drivers, but also Ferrari. Ferrari obviously got a 1-2 last weekend in Austin, Texas, and questions were asked if they were going to repeat the same feat, and it turns out that it was. Now, before obviously we're going to talk about qualifying, obviously we're going to go to the usual guys qualifying and the race. But before we get into those, last weekend we saw three teams revealing their one-off liveries, and when it came to Mexico this last weekend, only one team revealed a one-off livery, and that is Williams. Now, Williams, their livery is interesting because obviously um, their their livery is a blue and yellow livery. It pays tribute to their entire history of their multiple championship winning titles that they had towards the 1990s in particular, and even the 80s. But obviously the main gist of their tribute is to pay tribute with the Latin American design. It features their partner, which is Mercado Libre. Their statement is located on the yellow section of the car, branding on the engine cover. It pays obviously tribute to their history. Um, and we haven't had a yellow portion on the Williams car in ages. So this was a welcome of fresh air. And if I give you my thoughts on the livery, I really really like it. I get as to why on the reason as to why they did this livery, and it's also a really nice tribute to their past winning title winning cars as well with that splash of yellow as well. So it's really really it's a really nice combination. I think it stands out. It stands out in my opinion. And obviously James Bauer, the commercial director of the Williams, said that obviously Williams and Mercado Libre are two brands. They are synonymous with speed, trust, and innovation. The same gist. But the thing about the livery is that they're going to keep it for this portion of the Formula One season. So I think they're going to do it until Brazil, and then they're going to stick back to their livery, which I agree with it. I think this livery stands out more than their standard livery than their standard livery, to be honest. So yeah, overall, very very nice. I think come by the end of the season predictions and even reviewing choosing the best liveries, I think this could could squeeze in as one of the best. So very very nice. Probably give it like somewhere between a 7.5 or even an 8, to be honest. I mean, not quite a 9, but I think I would give it like an 8 out of 10. Really nice livery, and stands out in my opinion, specifically for a team that currently at the moment is trying to find its feet and trying to get more towards the trajectory. Now, continuing on with Williams, Franco Colapinto also announced that he would be wearing a different race helmet. Now, his race helmet pays tribute to Carlos Reutemann, who is considered one of the best Argentine Formula One drivers in the past. So that was a very very nice tribute from Colapinto to Reutemann. Very very nice touch to that. And also, this was also a special occasion for Fernando Alonso because this last weekend's Grand Prix was the 400th appearance in the sport. Obviously, Fernando Alonso, he's been in the sport for a long, long time now. So this is probably his 24th season. If I'm not mistaken, I think he started back in 2001. So this is like his 24th season into the sport now. He's approaching his twilight years. Now considering now he's in his 40s. So this was a very very special occasion for Fernando Alonso. But unfortunately, his weekend didn't turn out to be that way. So which we're gonna get into very 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 soon. So now, obviously, we're gonna get into the main meat as we always do, guys. We're gonna start with qualifying, and then we're gonna talk about the race. Which, to be honest, guys, there really isn't much to talk about because apart from from a few exciting from the first few laps, there really isn't a lot to talk about to this race. But we're gonna start with qualifying. In Q1, we had two shocks. One of them, to be honest, expected, and the other one is from a driver that I wasn't expecting him to appear once again in Q1. But anyways, we're gonna start from the back. In Q1, Zhou Guanyu and Esteban Ocon in 20th and 19th. Again, considering how both teams are performing this season, specifically Sauber, no surprises. Completely expected to be completely expected to be there. But the first of the two shocks in Q1, Sergio Perez in 18th, his miserable run continues in qualifying, and both me and Malcolm said last week that Perez has to perform this week. He had to perform in his home race, and it turns out it didn't. I mean, P18 to start your home track in 18 is a horrible, horrible way to do so. And he had, I mean, it all came from him. He had nothing to complain about. I mean, that came all from his mistake. And obviously, the crowd were very, very disappointed by it. That's obviously a position that their home that their hero they didn't expect him to be in that position. So 18th place is very, very poor for a driver like Sergio Perez, and that's not exactly where that's not where he wants to be. He just can't catch a break at the moment, Sergio Perez. I mean, completely out of his depth at the moment, with his performances and in the race as well. So not good enough. Even more surprising is Oscar Piastri in 17. Now, as I said in the Mexican Grand Prix, guys, this track is known for its high altitude, and also what I also forgot to mention as well is that this track can fall victim can be a trap for many drivers to fall victim to the track limits, and Piastri is one of those drivers that fell victim to this trap. And this isn't the first time that he exceeded track limits during this weekend. He ended up repeating that same feat when it came to the race. But yeah, for Oscar Piastri in 17th to get knocked out of Q1, that obviously ends his incredible streak of getting into Q3 for a number of races. So that's an end to that streak. But that's the second weekend in a row where he ended up in Q1. Now, obviously, last weekend he got knocked out of in the first part of sprint qualifying. He only managed 16th, and I was really hoping that Piastri would avoid that same mistake with last with this weekend, and it turns out that wasn't the case. Um, yeah, listen, I know this might be considered a bit of a rookie mistake for a driver like Oscar Piastri to end up where he ended up, but he had a lot of ground to make up for that race to start the race back in 17. So that is not for a driver of his caliber not great to start the Mexican Grand Prix from that position. Um, in 16th, we had Franco Colapinto, which was disappointing because Franco Colapinto has been showing a lot of consistency during his time in the sport ever since he replaced Logan Sargent a couple of races ago. So 16th, look, obviously with the Williams, not that much of a surprise, considering it's one of the slowest cars on the grid. But yeah, with Colapinto, thought he was gonna end up maybe in Q2, maybe made a bit of a push to Q2, maybe also into Q3. But yeah, 16th, not the best result for him to start another race of your Formula One career from that position. Now, speaking of Franco Colapinto, this last weekend he also addressed his future in F1. Obviously now Sauber is the final seat that is the only remaining seat that is left for next season. And he's almost close to admitting that he won't have a seat next season, which is a shame because he has the talent, he has the potential to show it. And obviously, obviously we have to see how he's going to perform in the last few races of the season. But yeah, I would maybe for a driver, maybe of a driver with that potential, I think I would have maybe give him a seat for Sauber this season. But let's see. Obviously, we have to talk about qualifying first. Um, Q2, again, Q2, not much of a surprise. Sorry, no. Obviously in Q2, not too many surprises in Q2, but there was one maybe with Valtteri Bottas in 15th, with the Sauber getting that Sauber into Q2, a bit of some relief considering how bad that car has been this season. So yeah, 50th place for Valtteri Bottas there. In 14th, Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso in 13th. For Aston Martin in general, I was mentioning Fernando Alonso having a poor weekend in general, not having the best of weekends in general to mark his 400 appearance in the sport. And obviously in qualifying that turned out to be the case. 14 and 13th, not great for Aston Martin. They're just not having a great season at the moment, Aston Martin, aren't they? Compared to last season and the season before. Um, they're having a significant downgrade with the season. So 14th and 13th, not a surprise considering their form, but those aren't great positions to be starting the race in. Um, Now with Q2, what happened was that Yuki Tsunoda crashed towards latter stages, which affected all the drivers to make one last push towards making themselves towards pushing themselves into Q3, and Yuki Tsunoda prevented almost every driver to publish their final lap, and that also included his teammate Liam Lawson. So with the Racing Bulls 11th and 12th. Compared to their rivals, it's not the worst result on paper to be starting the Grand Prix at, but yeah, that's 11th and 12th, a little bit unlucky to just miss out by just a few seconds, to only miss out by just an error by one of their drivers. So yeah, 11th and 12th for Racing Bulls. To start the top 10, Nico Hulkenberg with Haas. Now Haas, again, last weekend they had a fantastic weekend, and with this weekend it was exactly the same for them. 10th for Hulkenberg and and even more impressive, 7th for Kevin Magnussen. Um, it seems like Haas are picking are picking up the pace at the most crucial moment of the season, because their rivals all outside the top 10, with the exception of Pierre Gasly, who started the race in 8th, and Alex Albon in 9th. But Haas are just picking up the pace at the right moment right moment at this moment in time. So 10th place for Hulkenberg and 7th for Kevin Magnussen continues that for me continues their run of their great run of form in both qualifying and even the race as well, which we're gonna get to very very quickly. Sandwich between them, Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon. For Alex Albon, that's a great effort for the Williams to push itself into Q3. And Williams, over the last couple of races, they have been making the effort um, of putting, if not both drivers, at least one of their drivers into the top 10, and that continued with last weekend's qualifying, where we fought Alex Albon in 9th. Pierre Gasly in 8th. That's a great result for Pierre. That Alpine has been going has been going through the rocks throughout the season. They've been having a very very poor season. Considering his teammates starting at the back of the grid and with him in 8th, that's a great position to start the race in. So fantastic for him. On the top 6, pretty. You got the usual customers in top 6. We got the Mercedes, the two Mercedes drivers in 6th and 5th with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Again, kind of expected with their pace at the moment. Last weekend, obviously, they had a shocker of a weekend, specifically Lewis Hamilton. So he obviously needed to bounce back from his horrific performance in Austin. So to start the race at least inside the top 10 is exactly where Hamilton exactly where he wanted it to be. George Russell in fifth. Again, as I said, not much of a surprise. I think he did the best he could have managed with that Mercedes. So fifth place for George Russell. Leclerc in fourth, Lando Norris in third, Max Verstappen in second, and the smooth operator Carlos Sainz in pole position. Ferrari again, maybe not starting the race. Both cars starting the top three, not having both cars in the top three, maybe to start the race, but um, Leclerc in fourth and Sainz in pole position in particular. Great results for Ferrari, and even they. I mean, I've mentioned, I've said about Haas of picking the pace at the right moments. During this portion of the season, and Ferrari are doing exactly the same, and the race turned out to be even more sweeter, more sweeter than that. Um, with regards to Lando Norris, I was a bit underwhelmed that he started the race not in the front row of the grid but in third, because that for me it was continuing the same trend that happened last weekend. It wasn't quite at our best, at our most ruthless pace compared to the European portion of the season. So to start again, to lack a bit the pace of one of the Ferraris and even one of the Red Bulls as well, with Max Verstappen's Red Bull, was a stink in the tail, for a bit of a stink for Lando Norris. But obviously, starting in the top three isn't a bad result for him. So that for him was a good opportunity to make some ground. Verstappen in second, obviously wanted to secure pole, but even the Red Bull in general wasn't at its high almighty best during this weekend. And as for Carlos Sainz, pole position, Leclerc did it last weekend, so this was like a return of favor from Sainz, and he got pole position quite comfortably. I mean, a 1:15.946 with Verstappen with a 1:16.171 and Lando Norris with a 1:16.260. So he got pole position quite comfortably and quite at ease, Carlos Sainz. So fantastic, and even for Sainz, his last few races with Ferrari as well, because obviously he's heading to Williams next season. So he's doing the best. He's savoring the moment, and he's doing the best he can manage with that Ferrari and with his team in general. So yeah, pole position for him. This was a good opportunity for not just obviously for not just for him, but even for the whole team to make their best efforts and to have a fantastic race, to obviously have a final push for the constructor standings. So now we're going to get into the race. 9 p.m. in Maltese time. Quite late. Even just the same with Austin last weekend, and probably even in Interlagos. I think that's going to be a little bit earlier compared to Austin and the Mexican Grand Prix. Um, Now, obviously, the talk of as I said earlier on in the episode, guys, the main talk this weekend was, can Ferrari repeat the same feat um, as they did in Austin, and will Lando Norris close the gap on Max Verstappen for the drivers' championship? Now, we look at the start. Now this season so far, guys, we've had um, pretty clean starts, but this Grand Prix ended that streak, because towards the back of the grid, Alex Albon touched Yuki Tsunoda's one of Yuki Tsunoda's rear tires, which sent Yuki in the stands, towards the stands, and both he and Albon retired from the race, and um, uh, that triggered the safety car, basically. So the safety car, from having a hiatus of not being called up, for being called up to on the bounce, because obviously last weekend we had a safety car, and this weekend once again we had the safety car earlier on in lap one. Now during that incident, Carlos Sainz went off the track, and he had to give the place back to Verstappen because obviously he was gaining an advantage. So in order to not to get any penalties with that, and obviously the race after that incident was under safety car for the for the next couple of laps, because obviously the incident between Albin and Tsunoda had to you had to call a safety car for that, because the car was literally just on the side of the track. So I would have been amazed if there was no safety car towards there was no safety car towards that incident. And the race was restarted around lap nine, around lap eight and lap nine, and that was the moment where Carlos Sainz took the lead of the race. He did an overtake on Max Verstappen, and that was pretty much the story of the Grand Prix from the top of the grid. Now, the most exciting portion of the race was during this section, because just a lap later, Lando Norris Norris and Verstappen were going head to head, because obviously Norris was about to overtake Verstappen, and that was when the controversy started to happen, because Lando tried to do an overtake on Max. Max pushed him off the track, and a few moments later, Lando was again about to overtake Max, and even and he once again puts Lando off the track as well. So that is two occasions where Max took Lando off the track. Now, obviously, we know that Max is a very fearless driver. He's a no nonsense driver, but and obviously with his overtakes, he can be very very ruthless. But that was very very dangerous driving from Max and Lando himself. He told me that he was on the team radio. He sounded a bit worried, because he was telling me that he was dangerous, and I have to agree with him. Obviously, no recency bias, because obviously I'm a McLaren fan, but that was dangerous driving from Max. To, to to put Lando literally twice off the track, he could have easily retired from the race and have a very nasty incident. Obviously, Formula One cars are extremely fast. I mean, they're literally driving around 300 miles per hour, literally, on some portions of the track. So, very very dangerous driving from Max, and that obviously the stewards had to be involved in this, and they were ruthless. I mean, obviously the stewards are known to be ruthless with their decisions. We've seen over the past couple of races and even the past couple of years that they can be ruthless in their decisions, and they were ruthless here in Mexico last weekend, because they gave Max a double 10-second penalty. One of them was pushing Lando off the track, which I agree with as well, and the second was was going off the track and gaining an advantage, which I also agree. And that obviously compromised Max's race, understandably, a 20-second time penalty. But to be honest, that was from his own doing, because you cannot uh, push a driver like that off the track, not once but twice, and not only that, to gain advantage of the track. So that was very very dangerous play from Max to be taking those sort of decisions. Obviously, a fine line of fair racing, and that was not fair racing from Max's side. 15. The two Mercedes were having a go at each other, basically, of trying to overtake, but luckily there wasn't any major incidents, because the overtakes were pretty clean in that aspect. Going back to Fernando Alonso, his 400th occasion in his 400th appearance in the sport was a memorable one, and that came through on lap 16, because he had to retire the car. He had some issues with his car, and that put an end. That cost his race. He was forced to retire from the race. Obviously, Alonso was a legendary driver in the sport, but this was one of his off days. Definitely one of his off days. One of his off days in the sport, and very, very unfortunate to retire very, very early on in a landmark race for him for hand appearance. But obviously, that was beyond his control. and it was sad for him that he had to retire from the race. Um, Apart from that, guys, the race was pretty uneventful, and apart from those first few laps, this race was a procession, unfortunately, and that is a word that's been quite some time since I've last brought up that word. But this race, unfortunately, was very, very uneventful. It was a procession for most of it. I mean, if we look at most of the action took place towards the back of the grid or in the middle portion of the grid. Um, speaking of of having speaking of overtakes towards the lower portions of the grid, um, Sergio Perez was having a Sergio Perez and Liam Lawson were tossing about together, basically of trying to overtake each other during the early portions of the race on lap 19. Um, uh, Obviously, they overtook each other during those sections. Perez also struggled at first to overtake Stroll, but then he eventually did the overtake on him. But apart from that, guys, as I said before, the race was very, very uneventful. Not much happened after the chaotic first few laps, and then obviously that tussle between Verstappen and Norris. Now Verstappen had to take his 22nd time penalty around lap 27, which put him down, which as a result ended up toward outside the top 10. But then he made as the race went on, he made that late charge towards the top 10 spots, to top 10 places, pretty expected for the car itself, and even for the driver of his caliber as well, to be making those overtakes. But yeah, as I mentioned before, guys, not much happened after that. A few overtakes there and then. Um, However, as I said, Ferrari were repeating the same. Ferrari were untroubled throughout that race. They were first and second for a large part of the race. But unfortunately, on lap 63, towards the start finish straight, Leclerc lost control of his car. Norris was pushing really, really hard to win the race, but unfortunately he was 7 seconds behind. But he was only just under 1 second behind Leclerc, and as a result, he made the effort, and Leclerc's mistake costed him because he went off the track, and Lando overtook him. Did breeze past him to climb second, basically. So um, a bit of a stink for Ferrari, but that honestly was a minor negative. That was one of the very, very few negatives that Ferrari had throughout this weekend, because once again, I said in the towards the start of this episode, guys, I said that the talk of the town was, will Ferrari repeat the same feat? And the answer to that is yes. Once again, they got everything spot on from qualifying to the pit stop strategies. They were they were all in accordance, basically. And last week we saw Leclerc being untroubled and dominated the entire race. And this was a role reversal, because now his teammate, now it was his teammate's turn, Carlos Sainz, and Sainz overtook Verstappen on after the restart, and he was untroubled for the entire race. It was the smoothest. I mean, talk about the smooth operator. This was the smoothest drive throughout his entire career, pretty much. He went on to win the race, undeservedly so. Untroubled, as I said, throughout the entire race. For me, he is easily my driver of the day. I can't think of any other drivers that could have got that spot over Sainz. So it was a fantastic result for Ferrari. And as I said before, um, this is the perfect time for Ferrari to make a statement and to make a late push to win the constructors title, because now not only they are ahead, they have increased the gap on Red Bull, but they are gaining up on McLaren, and they're gaining up quite quickly, which is quite worrying for me, because I'm a McLaren fan, and I'd obviously want my team to win the constructors championship. The drivers is looking a little bit tricky now, approaching the last few races of the season. But Ferrari are making a late charge for that constructors title because they finished first a 1-2 last weekend, and this a 1-2 last weekend in Austin, and in this weekend a first and a third place for Leclerc, and it was almost. I mean, if Leclerc didn't do that mistake, it would have been back to back 1-2s for Ferrari, which would have been a mad stat. And if they do the same once again in Interlagos this weekend, the pressure on McLaren is on now, especially if both of their drivers don't find themselves in the top five. Now going back to McLaren, Lando tried hard. He was pushing hard for him to to get himself that win. But unfortunately, it was too little, too late. He was again 7 seconds before he did that before he jumped into second. He overtaking Leclerc, and by the time he crossed the line, he was around 4.7 seconds. So that was going to be very difficult for Lando. But this is second place to finish well above your main rival, who's Max for the drivers championship. Um, Plenty of positives to take for Lando, but obviously he would be a bit disappointed that he wouldn't have, that he didn't got that race win. Um, McLaren in particular just didn't have the same pace as Ferrari during this weekend. Compared to Red Bull, I think they were the better of the two teams, but this was the best you could have managed. This was, I think, the best you could have managed. Lando to get second. A great effort for him. There are plenty of positives to take for this weekend. I mean, the gap between him and Max now has been reduced, and rightly so. Um, uh, so yeah, plenty of positives to take for Lando Norris, but second place is a great result for him. Leclerc in third, again, he would have been a bit gutted that he couldn't hold on to his second place. But listen, uh, for both drivers to get into the top three, doing it back to back, from Austin is fantastic. And Malcolm, understandably, because Malcolm obviously texted me this morning about the race. He was very happy. He was thrilled that he got that his team won, and it's a great time to be a Ferrari fan. There's a lot of optimism to take. If you are a Ferrari fan, and onwards and upwards. Because for what most fans, and even most fans in the sport, want from Ferrari, it's been a very long time since they took home a title, constructors or drivers in particular. So a fantastic weekend for Ferrari. Get both drivers in the top three. Uh, Mercedes also had a decent weekend, fourth and fifth, with Hamilton and Russell. For Hamilton, well needed compared to Austin last weekend. This disastrous performance last weekend. This weekend was the complete opposite, fourth and fifth. Best they could have managed with both drivers. They didn't have the same pace as Ferrari, Red Bull, and McLaren had, but um, uh, not not really anything to complain about for Mercedes. So the best they could have managed with fourth and fifth. Decent result for both. That's 22 points now for them in the back. So that for me, I think they have maybe fourth place in the bag. I think, which again, not where they want to be at this stage, but better than having no points. I mean, compared to last weekend, with just George Russell securing the points. Verstappen in sixth. Obviously, his 22nd time penalty compromised his race, but that was obviously his fault because he didn't. No one told him to push Lando off the track. But yeah, with regards to Max, not the best weekend for him. That Red Bull just wasn't really at the races this weekend, and even his teammate did even worse. Even worse. So this was a very frustrating weekend for Max. And obviously his advantage now has been reduced in the driver's standings. I still think that he has the driver's title in the bag, but you can never tell with what's going to happen during the last couple of races. So let's wait and see. But this was not a great weekend for Max. And even Red Bull in general, they had a really poor weekend in general. Red Bull. Um, Haas with Kevin Magnussen in seventh and Nico Hulkenberg in ninth. Between them, there was Oscar Piastri in eighth. Starting with Haas, fantastic weekend again. Excuse me. Starting with Haas, a fantastic weekend for the team. Once again, they repeated, re, re, continuing on their strong form from last weekend in Austin, and they carried it once again to this weekend in Mexico. Both drivers in the top 10 and their rivals all outside the top 10, specifically Williams, we're talking about, and even Racing Bulls didn't do that great either. Great result for us. To have 8 points in the bag is crucial at this stage. Um, Oscar Piastri in eighth, great effort for him from obviously starting the race towards the back of the grid in 16th. So this was a great effort for him to push himself in the top 10. But I expect him to make more ground when it comes to Interlagos this coming weekend. So I hope to God that um, he can do a better result from there. But um, uh, he just can't exceed. He just can't afford to exceed track limits once again. Coming the next few races, because that's the second time he's done that back to back. So yeah, expect better for Oscar Piastri. But listen, a great effort for him to start to make ground and get himself in the top 10 and get a few points for the team. And especially also that Oscar's there are rumors going on that Oscar might replace Sergio Perez next season. So I think he's doing it on purpose, that he doesn't want that Red Bull seal. But let's wait and see on that. But yeah, eighth place for Oscar. Expect better things next weekend. As I mentioned, obviously Nico Hulkenberg in ninth with the Haas, and Pierre Gasly getting the final point for Alpine in 10th. Priceless point for Alpine. Obviously not going to do a lot, not going to change a lot of things. But listen, 1 point for Alpine, at least to get one of their drivers in the top 10 is um, is going some shining light for them, but not the worst result, but also not the best result in the world for Alpine. But listen, 10th place, 1 point is fine for them. Um, my driver of the day, obviously, as I mentioned, I mentioned before. I'm going to mention it again. Carlos Sainz, obviously, my driver of the day. He was also voted driver of the day by by the fans after the race, and deservedly so. Um, uh, Obviously, a bit bittersweet for Carlos, because he's gonna drive for Williams next season, and he won't be having a lot of a lot of these podiums and wins with the Williams. So he's doing the best. He's savoring every moment right now. He's got 2 wins this season already, and this was a great weekend for Carlos Sainz. A smooth drive, a flawless drive again from Sainz, and he's obviously savoring the last few races with Ferrari. For me, they're still, in my personal opinion, they're still Ferrari are gonna make a big mistake removing Carlos Sainz. I think he should have had at least another season with the team, because he has the talent. He's a very underrated driver in my opinion. He's showing the talent each week that he can be a potential title winning driver if he is given the car, and if he shows his talent and his capabilities. But this was an unbelievable weekend for him. Driver of the day, no question about it. And let's hope he can have a one last racing before he makes the switch to Williams. So fantastic performance for Carlos Sainz, and even Ferrari in general. For me, they are just the general winners of this entire weekend. I mean, the best of the bunch again. They getting the car spot on, and it seems that they are they have found their pace at the most crucial part of the Formula One season. So let's wait and see if they have enough to win the constructors title, or make a late charge. But if they repeat the same feat once again in Interlagos, the pressure on McLaren is going to be well and truly on. If they obviously don't deliver the same strong results as Ferrari did. Um, Loser of the day has to be Sergio Perez, man. I mean, it's either Sergio Perez or one of the Red Bull drivers. Even the Racing Bulls had a stinker of a weekend as well. But my pick is Sergio Perez, man. I mean, this guy just cannot catch a break at the moment. His miserable run continues, and he had. I think this was one of his stinkiest performances in his entire career, in my opinion, because to linger at the back of the grid in your home race, and both me and Malcolm said that we expected Perez to deliver for this weekend, and he has absolutely not delivered. I mean, a terrible, terrible performance, and and he was also a bit delusional in his post-race comments, because he was that this was his last this was his last race, his last home race as a driver, and he denied it, that he strongly denied those claims, and he said that he's going to be racing with the team next season. To be honestly, I'm not expecting him to get a driver's team next season. I mean, there's no way he's gonna stay. He's gonna be staying there at the end of the season, because he is just not delivering at all, consistently out of the points. He's literally opened the door for Ferrari and McLaren to have a shot for the constructors title, and to put Red Bull pretty much out of it completely at this stage, in my opinion. So he's by far the loser of the day. Just a stinky performance from him. Um, my dick of the day has to go to Max Verstappen as well, for what he did to Lando Norris, understandably. And with regards to clown of the day, I don't really have a pick for that, so that's going to be anonymous. Um, if we look at the driver standings, Verstappen stays on top with 362 points. Lando Norris remains in second with 315 points. The gap now is just over 50 points now. I know it seems a lot at this stage, but anything can happen now during these last couple of races. So the gap might reduce. There's a chance that the gap might reduce if this one continues on. Um, Leclerc in third with 291 points, and even he's slowly catching up with Lando Norris as well. But looking at it a bit tricky there in that regard. Oscar Piastri in fourth with 251 points. Carlos Sainz in fifth with 240 points. Lewis Hamilton in sixth with 189 points. Sorry about that. George Russell in seventh with 177 points. Sergio Perez in eighth with 150 points. Fernando Alonso in ninth with 62 points. And Nico Hülkenberg in 10th with 31 points with the Haas. If we look at the constructor standings, it's looking very, very neck and neck between McLaren and Ferrari, guys, and even Red Bull. But the gap is reducing. That gap is only reducing with every race. McLaren stay on top with 566 points. But the gap is just 29 points now between them and Ferrari, because Ferrari are now on 537 points. And if they continue this pace, they will catch up on us, absolutely, in this regard. Red Bull in third with 512 points. Mercedes remain in fourth with 366 points. Aston Martin in fifth with 86 points. Haas in sixth with 46 points. Racing Bulls in seventh with 36 points. Williams in eighth with 17 points. Alpine in ninth with 14 points. And Sauber remain scoreless at the bottom of the grid. And that drinking bid that me and Malcolm did the last couple of episodes is still on hold at this point, guys. And I was a bit concerned, actually, because at one point Bottas was in the top 10, but that didn't last long, unfortunately. So all right, guys, that is it. That is the end of another episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and obviously, apologies for today. Obviously, I was by myself, but we managed to soldier through it, as we always do, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on our socials, guys, as I mentioned during the start of this episode: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Our next episode is just in a week's time, guys. We're heading into Interlagos for the Brazilian Grand Prix, one of my all-time favorite tracks in the entire calendar, and it promises to be another thrilling race in this season. Let's hope we're gonna have more of the same next weekend. And thanks, guys. Hope you have a great week, and as always, we see you for the next episode. Peace.